I'm not used to these things. I'm Belle Saunders Naish, wife of Ted Naish. I was born in Charlotte, Michigan, which is over near Lansing. My father was a printer and believed strongly in education for everyone. When I was young, we moved to Detroit, and I became a teacher, having absolutely no interest in the printing business. I was still teaching and living with my sister Alice when I met my dear husband. Ted was in Detroit on a business trip. At 45 years old, I had resigned myself to spinsterhood, and I was fine with that. But Ted and I were such a good match. Same interest, similar temperament, that before long we decided to marry. Mother and father were gone by then, so we thought at our age, 45 and 55, it wasn't necessary to have a long engagement. So we married in Detroit and left for Kansas City, Missouri, where Ted made his home. We decided that we'd have a honeymoon trip later on at some future date. I really enjoyed living in Kansas City. Ted and I were very contented with each other and lived a very wholesome and active life. We were active in our church and in our community. We took long walks around the large property near Edwardsville, Kansas, which is right across the border from Kansas City, Missouri. Beautiful property that Ted had bought several years before. The happiest years of my life were spent with Ted. Well, we had been talking about going to England for quite some time, off and on. That's where Ted was born, and also my father was from there. Well, finally we decided we were going to take that trip. I was so excited. I was finally going to meet Ted's relatives and see the place where he had been brought up. He obtained passage for us on the Lusitania. He felt that it would be perfectly safe in spite of the Kaiser's threats, because the American government would, of course, notify passengers if there was any real danger. Well, the Atlantic was just as calm as the Detroit River on a fine day. Unfortunately, Ted suffered from terrible seasickness and spent most of the trip in the cabin. But he insisted that I go out on deck as often as possible. He wanted me to enjoy the trip. Well, we were awakened on May 6th by the sound of the crew setting loose the lifeboats and swinging them outboard. I was very concerned. Ted said, "Stay cool, don't worry about it, and go out and see what's going on." Well, I went up on the boat deck, but I was not reassured by seeing the lifeboats all swinging outboard. The rest of the day was uneventful, so maybe Ted was right. On Friday, May 7th, I brought Ted his lunch in our cabin, and he insisted that I go back out on deck and see the Irish Islands as we passed. Well, to please Ted, I went back to the boat deck, and I did see the Irish Islands, but I couldn't figure out why we were so close. And our boat was going so slowly. I could have walked faster. On my way back down to our cabin to rejoin Ted, I heard a crash, and seawater came rushing in. And people were panicking, and they were running and yelling, and it was pandemonium. So I had to fight my way through a sea of people to get back to our cabin. Ted had taken our life belts and gotten them all ready for us to put on as soon as I got there, which we did. But then we had quite a time getting back up on deck again. People were everywhere. There was an officer who told us when we got there that the boat would float for an hour or more. We didn't believe him, because we could just tell from the angle of the horizon to the deck that we didn't have much time. But Ted and I helped other people as we could to get their life belts on. And then I saw something going over our head, and I threw out my arm to ward off a blow, and the seawater came up, and it was so cold, and I felt something push me forward. And the next thing that I remembered was looking up and thinking how pretty the sun looked, shining down through the water at me. And I wasn't afraid. It was so calm and so peaceful. But then I felt something bump against my head. And a man was trying to pull me out and up onto an overturned lifeboat. The Julia. And it wasn't long that we waited there and we were rescued by the Julia. I was on the deck of the Julia and I saw a fellow passenger. Theodate Pope was being brought on, and she had been given up for dead. But I implored someone to please use artificial resuscitation on her to help her breathe. And it was a while, but they did get her revived and her breathing stabilized. She was so grateful that she settled a pension on me for the rest of my life, in thanks for saving her. Well, I stayed in Ireland for a short period of time searching for my dear husband, but his body was never found. I spent a short time with his relatives in England. They went with me to the American consulate and vouched for me as an American citizen and Ted's wife because all of our papers were lost in the boat. And then sadly I returned home to our home in Kansas City without Ted. I lived for another 35 years without my husband. I dedicated my life to charitable work, and thanks to the generosity of Miss Pope, I lived very comfortably on the pension that she gave me, so much so that I was able to donate the substantial acreage that Ted and I had to the Caw Council of Boy Scouts in Kansas, Edwardsville, for the building of a summer camp for the Boy Scouts in honor of my husband. That camp is still in existence now and has been provided a lot of fun and activities for thousands of scouts. I was finally reunited with my dear Ted on August 25th, 1950.